Now, for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning, let's welcome back Arise analyst Dr. Constance Ikwoku. Dr. Constance, welcome. Lovely to see you.
She's back like she never left.
Good morning, Yolanda. Good morning.
I think we have some
Good morning. Lovely to have you back.
I know, Yolanda, Vimbaya, Deswa, Benga here. How is everyone doing?
I'm so happy.
Dr. Constance, I hope you've not come back empty-handed, because
sure
specifically Benga and I spoke a lot of English in your absence. A lot of English was spoken. So we hope you came back with a pepper soup and jollof from where you came from, because...
don't worry about that. I got you. I got everybody. Don't worry.
Oh, lovely.
I know how it rolls. All right, we have to get to business this morning. Hello there, welcome to the program. We'll begin the newspaper review with This Day, which is our tradition. In This Day this morning, we'll start with what seems to be the biggest economic story this morning. Dangote fighting one of the biggest battles of his life to keep his very expensively built refinery afloat, and the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengusin, equally intent on driving home their point on unionism. The headline, FG wades into Dangote Pengusin dispute as union begins strike action. Oil workers direct shutdown of gas crude supply to refinery. Let's go to Abuja Inquirer before we discuss. There we have the headline, Dangote Refinery versus Pengusin, fears over fuel supply pricing. FG moves to avert supply crisis. So the bone of contention here is, in Pengusin's view, is that the sacking of 800 workers by Dangote Refinery over unionization is wrong. Pengusin, as a result, has instructed workers across the country to don tools, and a nationwide strike is expected to begin today. Pengusin claims the sacked workers have been replaced with 2,000 Indians. Dangote Refinery has not outrightly denied this claim, but accuses Pengusin of sabotage. I mean, first of all, this is a crisis the nation doesn't need at this time. From today, we may begin to see the return of fuel queues, and no one wants to go back there. There are different sides to this story, though. Unions are indeed essential. Labor unions are there to protect workers. They are leftist, and they fight for workers' rights. They cannot be wished away then. On the other hand, we do know that labor unions have been over the years accused of being less credible, being available for hire by the highest bidder. And then you have Dangote coming in, a businessman who wants to see his investment survive and do well. So both sides have legitimate claims and interests. Vimbai, let me bring you in here. What more are you hearing about this, and how do you see this matter playing out? Do we have Vimbai on the line? We don't? Oh, okay. Benga, what are your thoughts on this? Let's start here, and then we'll get them later.
It's quite pathetic, and I think one thing we should understand is that time is a force that invades human life. With time, people are now better educated with wider interest and more sophisticated with varied appetites. With time, people are becoming more difficult to fool, but easier to bore. So we are seeing the time factor and force in place now. Nothing is, there is nothing more successful than an idea whose time has come. If Dangote has structured his company and has discovered that some particular workforce is not in line with its structure for its investment plan, who is going to bear the costs? So I think Pengusin fighting for the welfare of 800 members of Dangote Refinery that were laid off could also have a point, because when you look at the fact that these people are also breadwinners of a particular family, and that is what it stands for anyway, to protect the welfare of its members in line with Section 89 of the 1948 International Labour Organization Convention. But when you also look at the fact that the reality, if you look at what Otedola said concerning how he founded Darkman in 2023, you will realize that times have changed, and we cannot hold back the force of time. Dangote has made a lot of investments. At the initial preliminary investment, we understand that $20 billion was spent in this. So the question I'm asking is that if the union, Nopeng and Pengasson, has a point, why don't they go to the National Industrial Court to sort out all this rather than putting Nigeria at risk and bearing the pains of the cost of this strike?
All right, I gather that we're back online with Vimba. If you want to go ahead and share your thoughts.
Yes, sure. So just to kind of date back the animosity between Dangote and the unions, as spelled out in one of the many statements released over the weekend. Dangote dated it back to 2007, to the time that they were to acquire some of the moribund refineries. And he alleged that, again, it was these unions that blocked that sale, if you remember that huge story from back then. So, over almost 20 years later, no love lost. But the concern here is the economic impact, because it's estimated that 14.7 billion naira will be lost daily if there is a total shutdown. This is because we know that Dangote is putting in, on average, 17 million liters into the market. We've become hugely dependent on the product that comes from Dangote. Now, the Dangote refineries have assured us that they have enough strategic reserves to be able to ensure that there is no fuel shortages and that there won't be any fuel queues. However, once those strategic reserves run out, then we immediately go into a 32% shortage of PMS in the market. Now, what are the implications of that? We already know that there's economic implications. We know that once there's a fuel shortage, prices of everything go up, whether it's justified or not justified. That's the knee-jerk reaction. And we know how hard the CBN has been working to try and bring down the inflation numbers. So I think there's a vested interest in the federal government to ensure that this strike action is resolved, to ensure that we don't see that sudden surge in inflation numbers again. What's the other issue? They're also threatening, well, it's reported they've already started switching off the gas turbines. They report that a part of Escarvos has already been shut down. What's the implication of this? Remember, power generation. So the GenCos have also raised an alarm, and they're saying it's a possibility that there will be a nationwide blackout following this dispute. So it's unfortunate that we're the ones who are going to bear the brunt of this disagreement, this age-old animosity and, shall I say, mutual suspicion between these two parties. And I hope that the meeting that will be held today with the Minister of Labour will be able to resolve these issues without us having to feel the impact of this fight in our pockets, because in essence we will all feel it, because that's how dependent we've become on Dangote refinery.
Many interests at play here, and we'll be watching that closely. Let's remain with this day for another story. There, the lead story says, Ghana, Nigerians now know the difference after Buhari, Tinubu want Jonathan back. Professor Jerry Gana is former Minister of Information and a long-standing member of the People's Democratic Party. Here, reconfirming that former President Goodluck Jonathan will run in 2027. Other papers reporting the same story. Let's move to Daily Sun. There, Jonathan will return as president, Jerry Gana. And that's at the top right-hand corner of that paper. Let's go to Vanguard newspaper. Jonathan will contest return to Aso Rock in 2027 on PDP ticket. Again, Jerry Gana. I mean, this has been a running story. What I am hearing is that former President Goodluck Jonathan is seriously considering a run. There's immense pressure on him to do so. And some of the permutations is that he will receive overwhelming support from the northern part of the country, owing to the fact that President Tinubu is very unpopular right now in that region. There's the South-South region that will fall in line. He will pull some votes from the Southeast, even if Mr. Peter Obi is on the ballot. So the fear then is if Mr. Peter Obi and Mr. Jonathan are on the ballot at the same time, that will hand the ticket over to President Bola Tinubu, not the victory rather, because Alhaji Atiku Abubakar we also know is planning to run. So that's why you see those meetings between Mr. Jonathan and Mr. Peter Obi. Adesso, how are you reading this situation?
things is that we're a long way away from these elections. I struggle to do all the political permutations that are going to happen as we go towards 2027. Importantly, like you said, the base of support for Peter Obi and Goodluck Jonathan will be very similar, particularly in the South, particularly, in the Southeast or the South-South. And that is also why President Tinubu has made sure to build up his support and his base there. If we've noted that the two governors who have decamped from the PDP to the APC have been in the South-South, that is because President Tinubu is not new to politics. He's true to it, right? And he's obviously seeing these permutations coming from far away. As you said, also in this game is Haji Atiku Abubakar, who is possibly the only northerner whose name is floating around in terms of running for election in 2027. Honestly, when we see what he said that is true is that Nigerians might look back at the Jonathan years now with a bit of a gleam in their eyes when we look at how much more life has become difficult in the preceding years after 2015. However, some of the problems that we are dealing with now are because of some of the mismanagement under the Goodluck Jonathan era. So even though we do look back and we say the Naira was stronger, inflation was lower, a lot of the problems that we're reaping now were sown during his era as well. And so that is something that I'm sure would be brought up as we go towards elections. But again, these permutations will keep changing. Before we were seeing that Peter Obi might have been meeting with Kwankwaso and his team. Then we heard Kwankwaso and his team were meeting with APC. So I'm sure that these gears will keep shifting as we go towards election time, and we'll see what they all decide, because before they come and face us and ask for our votes.
Yeah, absolutely. There will continue to be alignments and realignments, and we'll be bringing you that on a daily basis. As the final story on this day, FG rubbishes international claims of religious genocide in Nigeria, and that story features in Leadership newspaper 2 with the caption above the mast, "No genocide against Nigerian Christians," says Information Minister Mohammed Idris. This denial comes as allegations are circulating internationally that there's a systematic genocide against Christians in Nigeria, particularly in the north. Idris says, and I quote, "False, baseless, despicable, and divisive," is this report. He also mentioned that portraying Nigeria's security challenges as a campaign targeted against a single religious group is an oversimplification of the matter. I mean, Yolanda, I'll bring you in here. The minister is right that this matter is more nuanced than is being portrayed. Terrorism affects both Muslims and Christians in Nigeria, but that is not to change the fact that also Nigerians in the north, Christians also face religious persecution. And outside of that, the data available to foreigners or to anybody is that churches are being bombed, pastors are being killed, people are being killed every day. So the interpretation is that we have a government that is not doing what it's supposed to do, and that this is a problem in the country. How do you read this, Yolanda?
Well, first of all, I would like to actually agree with what has been said by this minister, concerning how terrible the situation is in terms of how we are wording these headlines. To say that there's a genocide and it is caused by religion is really it's true and false at the same time, because really and truly there are people who are being killed daily in the dozens, in the hundreds in Nigeria. For the past couple of months, we've been having a lot of these reports going on. But to say that they are purely religious affiliated, I think is a bit misleading. We cannot afford as a country to have these kind of headlines kind of smearing the way that the country is already, struggling in what it's doing. In where we are going as a nation. So to have these kind of reports is really harsh. But I think as well, it should be pointed out that we are struggling as a nation in the sense of insecurity. We have a lot of insecurity with lives being taken. We had these Benue killings. We've had it in Zamfara. We've had it in so many states. But to say that it is only religion that is the cause of it is unfair to what is going on. One of what he said, one of the things that he said is that this issue is being oversimplified and it's a multifaceted situation. And I'd like to agree with that. I think you also pointed that out, Dr. Constance, when you mentioned some of the remarks that he had been making.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do have, ethnic problems and religious issues
undoubtedly
in the country.
Yes.
Yeah, but yes, it is much more complex, and not a lot of Muslims are also being yes.
Dr. Constance,
yes.
If I may just make a comment on this, just on a different scale, I think that this is a failure of Pan-African solidarity. Because when there were allegations of white genocide made against South Africa, Africa stood silent. Nobody showed any solidarity with South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa went to go and see Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. with his delegation by himself. There was silence from the rest of Africa. Now, we all know that generally there is no genocide against white farmers in South Africa. Yes. That is false. Now, unfortunately, because that was a lie that was perpetuated and it was allowed to fester and Africa remained silent, now that a similar accusation and allegation can be made to other African countries, and it will hold water because they know that we will not stand united, and there's no African Union organization, there's no solidarity that will fight back at this push that we're seeing, because even if the case is that there is Christian persecution or there are issues, there are religious tensions that are historic, they date back to pre-colonial times. Is this the way that somebody is interested in resolving the issue, somebody who's interested in peace, growth, development, reconciliation of a nation? Is this how it's managed? Through a social media smear campaign, through this kind of propagandist approach? It doesn't show any sort of goodwill towards a positive development. So I still come back and point the finger at our African leaders, because when we saw similar allegations being made against South Africa, everybody stood silent. Now, I hope that in this instance, Nigeria will not stand alone. I hope other African voices can also stand up and tell the world that, yes, Africa, we have our challenges. We've had various conflicts. By the way, many of them instigated by the United States. If you look at what happened in Libya, for example, is what broke out a lot of the extremism that we experience in the Sahel today. So, if we can agree as Africans that, yes, we have our issues, however, we don't want interference, we just need diplomacy.
Well, but that's not completely true.
Indeed, genocide is a weighty word.
Absolutely.
And a weighty allegation. At the same time, we do have problems, and the focus should then be how do we solve those problems and make sure they do not continue, because they have been there over the years. Yolanda, you wanted to say
I was
something.
just going to agree with you, Dr. Constance. Genocide is such an ugly word. And ultimately, countries, especially in the West, will believe whatever it is that they want to believe. Just like you mentioned, when Cyril Ramaphosa went to the White House, they made an absolute mockery of it. They made an absolute mockery of South Africa and saying that, white people were being killed and they needed to be protected. And to this day, I still see reports where this narrative is being pushed. So I don't know how blaming our own leaders is going to bring a solution to that, because ultimately they'll believe what they want.
All right, let's move on from that story to Daily Independent this morning. Otedola to Umar Sani. I was whistleblower, not beneficiary of subsidy fraud. And that also appears in New Telegraph, if we can pull that paper up. Otedola to Umar Sani, I blew the whistle on subsidy fraud, was not a beneficiary. While billionaire businessman Mr. Femi Otedola hitting back at allegations linking him to subsidy scam by former media advisor to former Vice President of Nigeria, Namadi Sambo. We followed this back and forth between Sani and Otedola. Otedola fired the first shot or salvo when he said recently that he warned President Goodluck Jonathan that he was being misled, that oil marketers used depot licenses to steal 2 trillion naira under his government. The context here is that Otedola was speaking in support of Dangote refineries in the ongoing clash between it and Pengusin. So, I mean, it's no news that there's a lot of rot in the oil sector, which we've not been able to clean up as a country. Having said that, this tussle between these two men, I think, goes beyond business. There's also politics in it. At the root of this is politics and Jonathan's interest in 2027. Besides, Otedola was also a beneficiary of the Jonathan government. He received favors from that government, like, you know, so many top businessmen, including Dangote and the rest of them that have access to the presidency. So what we see is that it's difficult to delink politics from business. Benga, please come in here. How do you see this?
I think this clearly speaks to the volume of corruption in the oil sector. And I think the Pandora box is about to get exploded from a corruption that stinks to the high heaven. First of all, what happened to the Ike Imokede's reports? Why was it silenced? So I think it's time that the truth is about to get prevailed. And what also happens to the issue of the bribe, the $500,000 bribery scandal that transpired between Femi Otedola and Lawan Farouk, the chairman of the House probe. But there's still lots of questions to be asked. He said it was a sting operation, fine. But what was his interest in that sting operation? What was it? Because Zenon Oil was mentioned.
I don't think we can legislate over a case that has been concluded and a lawmaker was sent to.
Just allow me. Yes. Zenon Oil was mentioned. And now we have an aide to the presidency, a former aide to the presidency in person of Umar Sani, who is putting facts and figures together by saying that Zenon Oil controlled about 90% of diesel and 40% of other crude products. So we will now need to investigate if Otedola was not completely dealing in oil products, in oil products as he claimed. But be that as it may, we will need to be careful in our submissions, because he is saying that he is suing Umar Sani, a 1 billion naira for defamation, for making defamatory comments.
So when we look at all this, yes, because we have to run to the international headlines. And this one, please, very quickly.
Very quickly, yes. You know, this is a case of one monopolist supporting another. In the case of functionally a monopolist, Otedola supporting a Dangote. It's not surprising, and you see the political class always rally around each other and protect each other. Very importantly, as Benga said, we need the results of the Ike Imokede investigation. The same thing happened with the CBN. Investigations were done. The report was not released. They just reshuffled. We need to see actual accountability happen in public, both with our oil and gas sector, in our financial sectors, in these key sectors. What I was saying very importantly when we're talking about this case is that he said that he was primarily importing diesel. Fuel subsidy is not about diesel, it's only for PMS. However, there are other subsidies and taxes and exceptions that are given to businessmen that he could have or may not have been benefiting from. He said that by mixing these things up, perhaps Sani was acting in mischief or in ignorance. However, those other things also, because this sector is very opaque, those other things should be made transparent.
Oh, okay.
And on a lighter note, though, I mean, what a businessman. He used this opportunity to also advertise his book.
We'll be hearing more about this. Like, these businessmen, they have access to government, they enjoy a lot of favors, and is what it is. Let's move to the international headlines. We'll take all the stories together, and then Yolanda, you can comment. The Citizen newspaper, companies that steal your pension. Here, South African police probing a lot of employers for not paying over their employers' pension fund contributions. And then to the UK, the Daily Mail, worried about immigration. That's a question. Starmer says you're racist. And in the Guardian newspaper, Reform UK's racist migrant plans called will tear Britain apart, says a PM. And then in the Daily Telegraph, migrant benefits to be barred from the UK. And finally, in the Times, we are already in hybrid war with Putin, says SPY chief. Yolanda, at this point, is a battle for the hearts, souls, and minds of the voters between the Labour Party and the Reform UK. Please jump in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Constance. Now, first with what's happening in the UK, I think Starmer is just having a very difficult time. He's barely a year in office, and he is really coming under so much pressure and so much fire. We've been seeing this for months, and it has just been escalating more and more. I think the trip that Donald Trump made to Britain didn't help very much, because if you remember, he was talking about how, you know, England needs to kick out the migrants and they need to go forward with what America is doing. They should follow suit.
Did you hear what he said at the UN? He said, he told the Europeans, you guys are going to hell in terms of immigration. I can do it. You know?
Exactly. And I think that didn't even help matters when it comes to, you know, the politics that are currently going on in the UK. And now they are having this sort of, you know, good behavior type of measures that they are planning out for citizens, saying that from now on you have to have a certain, you know, working ID before you can start working. You have to do the digital ID and all of that. And if you remember as well, they also had the protests about the flags, because this racism thing came up again, and it leaves one to wonder, do they actually understand what racism means? Because to be saying that, you know, you're racist based on your choice of whether to lift your flag or that of another country, when you can have people of different races from the same country, you know. So it's all muddled up. And to talk about this last headline that you mentioned about we are in a hybrid war, I think we called this out a few months ago as well. Everything that's happening in Europe right now is an indicator of war. It's just that maybe the scores of people that are being killed are only in certain countries and in certain parts. You know, definitely we didn't have to take an MI5 agent to have to tell us that. It's pretty obvious that the world is at war with all that we're facing. Look at all that was discussed at UNGA as well. We were talking about recognizing Palestine as a state. Obviously, for that kind of conversation to be repeating itself, that means that really we're on the brink of danger.
You know, Europe is deeply divided, polarized over all this issue, whether it's on Palestine, whether it's on the Ukraine war, whether it's on immigration. The place is boiling. All right, those were your headlines from us this morning.
Well,
Dr.
you're watching.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure, and welcome back. We're so happy to have you here.